Welcome to the MCAN TV show. I am Carol Oldham, the Executive Director of MCAN, and I have here with me today a few guests, two guests, to talk about a great effort that's coming together. I have Joel Wool from Clean Water Action, and I have Claire Miller from Toxics Action Center. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. And so I thought maybe what we could start out by doing is folks might not know your organizations. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you do as an organization. So Joel, could you just tell us a little bit about Clean Water Action?
Sure. Clean Water Action is a national organization. We work on local, state, and national policies. I'm here in Massachusetts and work mostly on energy issues, although we do work on issues related to water infrastructure and toxic chemical reform as well. And love engaging, many parts of New England, many parts of the country, and certainly many different kinds of community groups and many awesome partners. So.
Great, great. And Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about Toxics Action Center?
Sure. Toxics Action Center is a New England-wide public health and environmental nonprofit. Our mission is to work side by side in the trenches with community groups that are working to clean up or prevent pollution. So I spend my time in living rooms and at kitchen tables with brand new community leaders to stop, dirty energy projects.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. So we're here to talk about Mass Power that's really focused on clean energy and moving the state forward. And it's called Mass Power Forward. And Joel, can you just tell us a little bit about what it is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I like to start this sort of conversation, the general conversations about energy, with a little, a nod towards the situation we have in Massachusetts and New England. And that's really one of major transition. So we have coal and nuclear power plants in New England shutting down, right? Both within our state.
Hallelujah.
Within our state and close by in the region. And that means that there is a significant amount of power going offline. We also know that, right, there's growing awareness around climate change. There's a big push for clean energy. And because there is, I guess, some space, right, in the power we need to fill, there is the desire by some sort of other dirty energy industries to come in. So we're seeing a surge, particularly I think of gas companies wanting to bring in very large pipelines and frankly very destructive along very destructive paths. So that's where we are. We're in this crazy sort of free-for-all in a way, many different industries battling. We get to determine our future. It's really what Mass Power Forward is about. We can make a choice right now. Our state's at the middle of New England. We use more, a huge amount of the power in the region out of the New England states, and a lot of the infrastructure, whether it's pipelines, whether it's transmission lines, or if it's just the stuff we build for ourselves here, clean energy, wind and solar, a lot of it has to either happen here or go through us. And so what I and Claire and yourself and many others have been doing is really, I think, organizing people around the state to come together with a common vision for what do we want and how do we shift towards that clean energy vision, and how do we bring communities along equally and equitably, right, in that process, knowing that some of these communities are in fact losing power plants and are losing part of the kind of old, industrial economy. We need to figure out a place for them in the, in the future that we're fighting for.
So Claire, I know one of the things that in my interactions with you around Mass Power Forward that I hear you talking about a lot is sort of the scope of this coalition. There's this, there's a huge number of groups. Can you tell us a little bit about the geographic scope and the sort of types of people who are getting involved?
Absolutely. Mass Power Forward is definitely one of the largest, boldest, most visionary coalitions that I've seen and had the privilege to participate in. It's from the Berkshires to the Cape to the North Shore to the South Coast. Every part of the state is represented in Mass Power Forward. It's community groups, it's people who live next to coal-fired power plants or along pipeline routes, it's faith organizations, it's businesses, big and small. It's so many different parts of our community, and people coming together who, for various different reasons, just really want to see the vision. They really want to see the bold best decisions made by our elected officials.
And how many groups are part of the coalition at this
Oh
point?
gosh, well, it's
Joel, you might know this
always
too.
getting larger.
Yeah.
Last count was at least 125.
It's, yeah, over 130.
Yeah,
So.
it's amazing. And it's come together very quickly, right? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how it sort of came together, Joel? Because it seems like it happened sort of overnight.
Sure, yeah. So there's a couple of things. I mentioned the energy transition. You got a sense of where the scope of who's involved. Clean Water, Toxic Action Center, and other groups have historically worked around issues like the phase out of coal, and we have had somewhat similar campaigns in the past. So that it's not as if this issue is not on the radar of energy transition, but it is not. It's never been this level. We've never had this kind of this powerful a movement or this much of a need for one. And so what I can say really is just that this summer we. A couple of the both nonprofit organizations as well as just community leaders, right? Volunteers from, whether it's from Somerset or from the South Shore or from Western Mass, from Boston, got together and said, what are we going to do to really push forward in a coordinated way? And one thing I could say is that you could have some of these groups fighting each other politically and otherwise. You could have people who live next to a nuclear plant say, yes, I'd be happy if gas pipelines and gas power plants are something that can help me take this plant offline, or vice versa. Let's keep nuclear there so we don't have to do X, Y, or Z.
Right.
I think what's amazing is that we largely have been able to coordinate people by focusing on what we do want and what we and how do we shift our attention and our political will and our resources there, and also I think cut away at the narratives that are propagated by the gas industry, by utility companies, that are frankly false around what we can do, whether clean energy is good for us or not, and also I think whether the consequences of staying with the staying with the status quo.
So I'd love to get to what we want in just a second, but I know one of the things that really amazed me was, we decided that we all wanted to do launch events at the same time, and there were a half a dozen events around the state. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? I know we've got photos of some of the events, and it's just, I think it shows a lot of the diversity of the movement and geographic diversity, economic diversity, racial diversity, and I just think it's one of the fabulous things that these happened simultaneously all across the state. I think it's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think that the thing that characterizes Mass Power Forward and one of the hallmarks of what it is that it relies on a decentralized grassroots movement. And so, we just know that there are talented, dedicated, committed people who can do this type of work all across the state, and that's one of the strengths of Mass Power Forward. And so, in August when we decided to do this, we were like, okay, let's launch ourselves in a month, and let's really tap into that. Let's actually hand this over and say to people in the Pioneer Valley, can you guys do an event? Can you guys do an event in the Berkshires? How about the South Coast? And folks like Climate Action Now really stepped up and said, we can do it, we got it, we're organized, let's go. And that was really the case all across the state. So we had 6 simultaneous launches with, people from all different parts of the movement standing together saying, enough is enough, it's time for us to continue and double down on the good stuff. Right. We absolutely want, wind and solar, let's go.
So in Boston, on the roof of the Greater Boston Food Bank, where there's a huge solar installation, right? We talked about sort of how clean energy is saving, is decentralizing our power, eliminating fuel costs, but also just saving money for critical, for service providers and for, on the North Shore up in Peabody, along the Ipswich River watershed. We said, look, this is a protected area. We've invested a lot in protecting it. It's a critical drinking water supply. It's also threatened by not only climate change, but a gas pipeline. Out in Western Mass, I think Claire would have been out in Holyoke, where residents have worked to transition from coal to clean energy and are along the way.
That event to me was amazing to be there. We had, Carlos Rodriguez, who lives next to the coal-fired power plant, speak, and Marianne Babinski from Westfield, who's been, fighting off a proposed gas plant for 5 years. next to climate activists or justice activists from Springfield, next to a selectman from Northfield, you know, where they're fighting a compressor station by Kinder Morgan. I mean, it was the whole swath of people standing, you know, next to Rep. Aaron Vega saying, you know, we have a vision, let's go.
And I love the thing too, the Boston Food Bank's, I guess, sort of representation of the fact, I mean, one of the things that I've seen a lot since I've joined MCAN is the fact that lots and lots of cities and towns, as well as lots of businesses and lots of service providers, like you pointed out, are saving money by implementing clean energy. And they're actually able to put that money, you know, into services that are really desperately needed by the community. And I think that that's important. You know, the image typically is that, you know, the clean energy is only for sort of the elite. But the fact is that it's really being utilized by a lot of people who really need it in two ways, for the climate justice reason and then also for the economic justice reason, which I think is really important.
And another example of that too is, you know, earlier this summer, before we had sort of gotten to launching the Power Forward, I did an event at the Dismas House in Worcester. That's a transitional home for people formerly incarcerated folks, right? They use savings from solar to help fund their programs.
Yes.
Because of our policies right now, they can't help other nonprofits in Worcester go solar because certain projects are restricted. Projects over a certain size are restricted in the National Grid electric territory. And so, you know, that's why, you know, we want to remove barriers to clean energy, arbitrary ones, and we also want to, you know, remove financing barriers and really commit our communities and our state to make the right choice, you know.
So actually that's a great segue, thank you, Joel, to what do we want as a coalition? So we've got this sort of platform, and folks can go to mapowerforward.com and check it out and sign on and volunteer and call their legislator and do all kinds of other things from there. But why don't you guys tell us a little bit about, I think, Claire, you were going to take point on this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of what we want as a coalition?
I'll say, first off, the thing about Mass Power Forward is that we intentionally are being bold, beautiful, and visionary. And so we very definitely want all of the good stuff. We want appropriately sited wind and solar. We want energy efficiency, and we want it quickly as much as possible because we have to, you know, reach our goals for global warming solution. You know, making sure we're reaching those targets. That is definitely number one. Right behind that is, you know, reducing and moving away from polluting energy as quickly as possible. So coal, oil, gas, nuclear, no thank you right now. And then the third piece of the platform is really prioritizing people, families, neighborhoods, and communities over power companies, making sure that that is where, you know, decisions are valued. And first and foremost, in my mind, that means no subsidies for polluting energy like gas. After that, we want to absolutely be punching up modernizing our grid. That's one of the things that really holds back all of the best things. And at the end of the day, we also want to make sure that we are, you know, helping the communities that have been living with dirty energy come through this transition as whole as possible. So doing right by municipalities and by workers so that they have a just transition through this crossroads. So that's kind of the beautiful picture that Mass Power Forward is trying to accomplish.
It is. It's a great vision. And one of the words that you just said, the crossroads, I think that's something that really struck me when we were all coming together and talking about this is, you know, you hear from the dirty energy folks that we're at a crisis, and, you know, sort of this fear-mongering feeling, and it's a crossroads, and it's a moment that we can take as, you know, as a Commonwealth, as all of our communities together, to have a really good conversation about where we want to go from here. And I think it's great that Mass Power Forward is driving that conversation. I'm really excited for MCAN to be a part of it. I'm excited to work with you guys on it. Joel, do you want to tell us a little bit about, I mean, I know one of the things, Claire talked about this a little bit, but you know, there are obviously really big advantages to the things that we're that are parts of the platform. So it's helping out the communities and the just transition for the workers. And can you tell us a little bit about how you see that playing out, or why we're even asking for it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a couple of things there. One, right, there's two things to balance in terms of the timeline, right? One is that we have decisions to make pretty much now or in the next few months. But the process is a path, right? We are at a crossroads, not a crisis, but there is a political crisis in the sense that we do need to make tough choices very quickly. And the opposition is very strong. I think what we're aiming for is really a triple bottom line, right? Jobs, community, and the environment. And there are going to be difficulties in that transition, but it means that we have to account to make it a just transition, right? To make our changing over of our power grid one that is fair and equitable, in addition to sort of climate friendly. We need to really start to account financially, providing for sort of community planning and municipal resources to communities if their energy sources, if their tax bases are changing, but also figure out how do you actually support the individual families as much as possible who are affected in this. And what that can mean in practice may be that we will put pressure on companies who, many of the power plant owners, right, are not necessarily they're not friendly to the employees there, even if some of them have been providing good wage jobs. So if there's transitions there, we want to be supportive of those folks however we can. Some of these things, the answers are not always immediately clear, but part of it is that we want to be advancing where there are opportunities for people, clean energy, citing new clean energy projects, significant amounts of it, right, so that there is ample work in energy industries, in construction, in other areas. And to make sure that in the industries that we're supporting, right, those are good job standards. So, I mean, this is Power Forward. It's also how Clean Water has historically, I think, taken a look to some of these issues. But really, if I had to say, it's just like you cannot look at these issues siloed. You cannot look at it just environmental, just climate.
Or just jobs.
Right, or just jobs, partially because, we need a bigger political base, right, to actually win a good solution for anyone. We need more than just the environmental community, or just a community group in this neighborhood, or just, the workforce of this facility, or potentially a future workforce or of another industry. We need to come together, and that's what we're trying to do, and trying to make solutions that it's always a political wrangle, it's always a negotiation, but to get to the best place possible and to plan in advance for changes that are beginning now, but that we've really seen coming for years.
So I know one of the things that we've talked about on prior shows is, how the Global Warming Solutions Act really set us up as a Commonwealth to get to 80% by 2050, which is this huge goal, right? And then we've got this sort of interim empty space where we don't know, how do we get there? It's such a huge thing. And I know that, folks have a whole bunch of different ideas in terms of solar, in terms of offshore wind. Are there any things that you guys have brought out of the community work that you guys have been doing that is illuminating for the 80% by 2050 goal? It's such it feels so huge and vague sometimes.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is probably partly because of the work that I do, is that we absolutely can't be building out new fossil fuel infrastructure if we have any hope to actually get to the clean, renewable future that we must get. And so, when I think about the Kinder Morgan pipelines and the Spectra pipelines and the 7 proposed gas plants across New England, we need to be united and organized in saying absolutely not. And, there's talk about trying to subsidize, this type of work through putting a tariff and, basically a fee on our
making everybody pay
making
for
us
it.
pay for it. It's insanity. And so, I would say the thing that I, am working with with community leaders along the pipeline routes is making sure that we are saying very loud and clear, absolutely no subsidy for gas.
Right. And to be clear, within the sort of Power Forward grouping, right, we have people who have different stances, political stances, or different sort of interpretations of like what amount of fossil fuel infrastructure we might need in transition.
Right.
But if you look at the projects that are proposed and the ways of financing that are proposed, I think you can come to much more clear decisions, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about billions of cubic feet passing through Massachusetts per day.
Per day.
Some of it
elsewhere.
some of it potentially to serve us if we're not making good use of the other resources or even the gas resources that we already have, but also going elsewhere. You know, certainly to other New England states, but also for export. The Canadian press is already reporting LNG export terminals waiting for New England pipelines, and we really can. We really need to use to make the best use of the infrastructure we have. So that means that when we have leaking gas distribution pipelines, we should not only be fixing them, we've started to do that at an accelerated rate. We can probably do better. But we need to stop charging consumers for gas that is lost, which is just this crazy concept.
I would rather pay for clean energy. If I'm going to pay for something, charge me for clean energy. So can you remind us of the website that people should go to? You can always obviously go to massclimateaction.org, but Mass Power Forward actually has its own website.
Right, it's mapowerforward.com.
And so folks can go there and sign up, they can take action, and there will be things ongoing to do. If you sign up, we will engage you. So
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Joel, again, from Clean Water Action, and Claire from Toxics Action Center. So thanks so much for joining us, and
Thank you.
I look forward to continuing to work together on this project.